I was staring at the purple endpoint of a titration, the sophomores finally getting the hang of it, when the email landed. The little notification pinged on my laptop, almost drowned out by the chatter of students cleaning burets. Subject line: regarding our future. A polite, sterile heading for the implosion of a 15-year marriage. The message itself, from a law firm I'd never heard of, Thompson and Associates, was brutally efficient. 3 sentences. Kyla had already filed. She'd already moved out of our house, the one I'd inherited from my folks. And, apparently, she'd already moved her new spiritual guide, a guy named Declan, in. The joint account, the one we'd meticulously built with my teacher's salary and her sporadic freelance graphic design income, was, the email chillingly noted, currently under review for equitable division, which I instinctively translated to empty. I closed the email, took a deep breath that smelled faintly of acetic acid and teenage enthusiasm, and told a student, "Nice work, Maya." Almost a perfect titration. My hands didn't shake as I collected their lab reports. Inside, though, a volatile reaction had begun, one I hadn't predicted. That night, after grading a stack of quizzes on stoichiometry, I didn't reply to the lawyer. I opened a fresh document and typed, "Project, Dissolution Analysis." My first step was always to understand the elements involved. The truth is, the solution had been showing signs of precipitation for months. Little things at first, almost imperceptible shifts in equilibrium. Kyla, who once claimed yoga was competitive stretching, was suddenly attending 3 mindfulness retreats a month. Her phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter, now had a new passcode and was perpetually attached to her hand. She'd started talking about energies and auras, concepts that made my scientifically trained mind twitch. The wedding ring, a simple gold band, was often missing. "Gets in the way during my chakra alignments," she'd said. I wasn't a fool, just a man who preferred observable data. So, I'd taken precautions, quiet experiments of my own. I meticulously scanned all our important documents, the house deed, still primarily in my name from the inheritance, thankfully, my pre-marital asset statements, my pension details, and saved them to an encrypted drive I kept in my locked cabinet in the school's chemical storeroom. Next to my father's old Kitasaito flask and my mother's pressed botanical specimens. I'd also opened a separate savings account at a different credit union, diverting a small, unnoticeable portion of my paycheck there each month. A control group for my finances, you could say. The night before her last retreat, the one from which she apparently wouldn't be returning to our home, she'd hugged me. A quick, almost clinical embrace. "Find your balance, Art," she'd whispered. Her eyes were clear, distant, like she was observing a reaction from behind safety glass. I should have recognized the final, irreversible color change then. I met Kyla at a university science outreach event. I was a freshly minted PhD, nervously explaining polymer chemistry to bewildered undergraduates. She was there with a friend, initially more interested in the free coffee, but she asked a surprisingly insightful question about cross-linking. We talked for hours that day. She said she admired my passion, my ability to make complex things understandable. We were married within 18 months. The early years were good, stable. She'd come to my science fairs, feign interest in my students' often disastrous volcano projects. She even helped me design the layout for the native plant garden I was cultivating in our backyard, the one I used for organic chemistry demonstrations. Our happiest moment, probably the day I got tenure. We'd opened a bottle of surprisingly decent champagne and sat on the porch swing of the house my parents had left me, the house that was now, apparently, hosting a stranger. She'd said, "We're a team, Art. You and me against the entropy." Turns out, she was the entropy. My parents were academics, a physics professor father and a research botanist mother. Their house, our house, was filled with books, old scientific instruments, and a quiet respect for empirical evidence. Kyla's family owned a chain of car dealerships. Nice people, but their dinner table conversations revolved around sales figures and market trends, not molecular bonds. They were always subtly hinting that Kyla could have done better than a high school chemistry teacher. "It's a noble profession, Arthur," her father once said, "but the ROI isn't exactly stellar, is it?" The house, a sturdy craftsman my dad had lovingly maintained, was mine before Kyla. I added her to the deed a few years into the marriage, because it seemed like the thing to do, a symbol of our combined solution. My teacher's pension, my main retirement asset, was something I diligently contributed to. Kyla had her own small IRA from her freelance work, but her financial planning was always more aspirational. I remember once trying to explain the concept of compound interest to her. She just smiled and said, "Declan says money is just energy, Art. It flows where it's intended." That should have been a red flag the size of a periodic table. The distance grew slowly, like crystals forming in a supersaturated solution. At first, it was small complaints, my obsession with my students, the late nights spent preparing labs or grading. "Don't you ever want to just catalyze something more exciting?" she'd asked once. Then came Declan. She met him at a holistic wellness expo. He was a transformational life coach, charismatic, with perfectly white teeth and a vocabulary full of vague spiritual buzzwords. Suddenly, our quiet evenings were replaced by her animated phone calls with him, discussing vibrational alignment and manifesting abundance. The final catalyst for our marital decay was our 15th anniversary. I'd booked a table at that little Italian place she loved. She texted an hour before, "So sorry, Art." Declan's holding an emergency manifestation circle. Rain check, I ate alone. Later, I found a receipt in her coat pocket, not from a yoga studio, but from a high-end jeweler, dated that same day. A purchase for a Declan P. A week after the lawyer's email, after the initial shock had subsided into a cold analytical resolve, I started my own investigation. If Kyla and Declan thought I was just some bookish, absent-minded science teacher, they were about to learn about methodical inquiry. I still had access to our shared cloud storage, the one Kyla used for her design portfolio, and carelessly for everything else. It didn't take long. Tucked away in a mislabeled folder called Inspa Mood Boards were photos. Kyla and Declan, not at a Spartan retreat center, but lounging by a resort pool in Sedona. Ticket confirmations for 2 to Maui. Then, the jackpot, a PDF of a bank statement from an account I didn't recognize, in Kyla's name only, showing a series of large, regular deposits from our joint account, and equally large withdrawals to an LLC I'd never heard of, Synergy Holdings Group. My reaction wasn't emotional, not yet. It was like finding an unexpected precipitate in a clear solution. Something was seriously wrong, and I needed to identify all the reactants. I needed a sounding board, someone who understood process and precision. Dave Miller, the head of our science department, was a grizzled veteran of countless school board meetings and lab mishaps. He'd seen it all. I caught him during his lunch break, a half-eaten tuna sandwich on his desk. "Dave," I said, "I have a domestic chemical spill." I laid out the basics, the email Declan, the emptied account, the suspicious LLC. Dave listened, chewing slowly, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Art, you old dog." I knew that Declan fellow was as slippery as a freshly dissected frog. So Kyla's not just leaving, she's trying to clean out the entire lab. He wasn't shocked, more pragmatically concerned. "First things first," he said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "Lawyer up. Not just any lawyer, you need a shark. My cousin Isabel down in the city. She eats guys like Declan for breakfast. And Art. Document everything. Every email, every transaction. Treat it like you're writing up an experiment for peer review. No emotion, just facts and data." His practical advice was like adding a stabilizing agent to my volatile thoughts. That night, unable to sleep, I remembered the smart home security system I'd installed a couple of years ago, mainly to check if I'd left the Bunsen burner on in my home office. Kyla probably forgot it existed, or assumed I wouldn't think to check. I logged in remotely from my laptop. The cameras were active. There was Declan, sprawled on my leather armchair in my living room, watching my TV. Kyla was in the kitchen, laughing at something he said, wearing one of my old university sweatshirts. I zoomed in. Declan was casually flipping through a rare first edition of a chemistry text I'd inherited from my grandfather, dog-earing a page. Then he picked up my favorite coffee mug, the one with the caffeine molecule on it, and took a swig. Kyla came over, perched on the arm of the chair, and they kissed. It wasn't just betrayal, it was an invasion, a contamination of my personal space. I meticulously downloaded the footage from the past week, Saved it to 3 separate encrypted drives. The images were Danning. Declan making himself at home. Kyla showing him how the new espresso machine worked. Them discussing selling some of my antique lab equipment. Each clip was a data point and a very ugly graph. The sight of Declan in my home, handling my things, with Kyla's complicity, flipped a switch. The initial shock, the hurt, those were still there, but they were being overlaid by a cold, hard anger. This wasn't just a messy divorce, this felt like a calculated extraction. My mind, trained to solve complex equations, started to see this as a problem to be solved. Project dissolution analysis became operation, reclaim and neutralize. I started a new section in my digital notebook, assets compromised, liabilities identified, Kyla Declan, Synergy Holdings Group. Objective: full recovery of stolen assets, legal consequences for perpetrators. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoring equilibrium. The next morning, I called Isabel Rossi, the lawyer Dave had recommended. Her voice was crisp, efficient. "Mr. Holloway, David Miller speaks highly of your meticulous nature. What's the situation?" I laid it out concisely. The timeline, the email, the joint account, the cloud evidence, the security footage, the LLC. I have digital copies of everything, organized by date and category. I finished. There was a pause. "Mr. Holloway," she said, her voice warming slightly. "You've done a significant amount of the initial legwork. That's unusual and very helpful. Can you come in tomorrow? Bring your data." I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks, a sense of control. The experiment was now moving into a new phase. Isabel Rossi's office was sleek, modern, overlooking the city. She was younger than I expected, sharp eyes, a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened intently as I walked her through my findings, occasionally nodding, her pen flying across a legal pad. "The HELOCs is the interesting part," she said, tapping a printout of the Synergy Holdings Group bank statement I'd found. "Kyla couldn't have secured that on her own, without your signature on something. Given the house is primarily in your name, and this LLC stinks like sulfur trioxide." She leaned back. "Your wife, Mr. Holloway, and her associate, Mr. Declan Vance." "Yes, I ran a preliminary check. His name came up flagged for questionable investment schemes. Appear to be more than just opportunistic. This has the hallmarks of a practiced con." Her directness was strangely comforting. "Our first step," she continued, "is a full financial audit and an immediate injunction to freeze any assets tied to that LLC and any recent large transactions from your joint accounts. We also report the potential forgery on this hypothetical HELOCs to the bank and the authorities. You, Mr. Holloway, are what we call an excellent witness. Your organized Isabel's team moved fast. Within days they uncovered the pathetical HELOC. It was real, for 75,000, taken out against my house a month before Kyla's departure. My signature was on the application, a clumsy, almost laughable forgery. Even a sophomore chemistry student could spot this as a poor replication. I muttered, looking at the scanned document. The funds had been immediately transferred to Synergy Holdings Group. Isabel also found records of Kyla and Declan Co. signing a lease for a luxury downtown apartment. The deposit paid from our joint savings 2 weeks before she sent the divorce email. The chain reaction was starting. Each discovery was a new data point confirming a systematic plundering. "Declan Vance isn't just a life coach, Art," Isabel said during our next call. "He's a predator. He has a pattern. Finds vulnerable individuals, often women with assets, gains their trust, and then bleeds them dry. Kyla, she might have started as a victim, but this level of cooperation, the HELOC, the apartment, she's an active participant now. A co-conspirator," the word hung in the air. This wasn't just my marriage failing, this was a calculated financial assault. Isabel filed the injunctions. She contacted the bank's fraud department regarding the forged HELOC and filed a police report. We provided them with my evidence package, the cloud files, the security footage, the financial traces. The bank immediately froze the remaining funds in the Synergy Holdings Group account, about a 40,000. The other 35,000 was already gone, likely moved or spent. A few days later my phone buzzed. Kyla. Her voice was high-pitched, frantic. "Art, what have you done?" "The bank called me. They're asking about the HELOC. Declan's going crazy. He says you're trying to ruin us." I didn't say anything, just listened. "We need to talk, Art. This is a misunderstanding. I pictured her face, the feigned innocence. Isabel Rossi will be in touch with your legal representative. Kyla, I said, my voice calm, measured. All communication goes through her. I hung up. The control group was holding. The local police department's financial crimes unit took an interest, particularly Detective Miller, no relation to Dave, thankfully. The scale of the fraud, Declan's emerging history from Isabel's research, and the clear evidence of forgery pushed it beyond a simple domestic dispute. Holloway, Detective Miller said, a wary-looking man with kind eyes, your meticulous records are impressive. You've basically handed us a case file. I spent an afternoon giving a formal statement, walking them through the evidence, explaining the timeline. It felt like presenting a well-researched paper. They were particularly interested in the security footage showing Kyla and Declan discussing moving assets before Art's lawyers get too smart. Isabel then learned from a contact that Declan, panicking, was trying to liquidate some other, smaller assets he controlled under different LLCs. He spooked Art. He's trying to convert everything to cash, probably planning to disappear, Isabel explained. The police are monitoring his known accounts, but he's slippery. The trap wasn't something we actively set, but rather Declan's own greed and Kyla's unraveling. The key piece of evidence came, ironically, from Kyla herself. She called me again, hysterical, leaving a rambling voicemail. Declan says we need to go to the Cayman Islands. He says you've poisoned everyone against him. He's got these bonds, bearer bonds. He says they're untraceable. He's packing them now. Art, you have to stop him. This is insane. She was clearly terrified, realizing she was in over her head. I immediately forwarded the voicemail to Isabel, who passed it to Detective Miller. The denouement was swift, based on Kyla's terrified, inadvertent tip off about the bearer bonds and Declan's planned flight. The police obtained an expedited warrant. They didn't catch him at the airport. They found him at the luxury apartment he shared with Kyla, his suitcase half packed with clothes, cash, and a portfolio containing nearly 200,000 in unregistered bearer bonds, likely the proceeds from other victims. Kyla was there looking pale and defeated. Declan was arrested for fraud, forgery, and money laundering. Kyla was taken in for questioning. The home security footage, showing her active participation and awareness of the fraud, was damning. The investigation unspooled Declan's entire operation. He was a serial con artist targeting mostly women, using his life coach persona to gain trust before defrauding them. He had a small network that helped him launder money and create bogus investment vehicles. Kyla, it turned out, had been more than just a dupe. While initially charmed and manipulated, she had actively participated in forging my signature and had benefited directly from the initial sums taken. Dreaming of a lavish new life Declan had promised, she had become a willing catalyst in his scheme. Declan Vance, faced with overwhelming evidence, much of it supplied by my careful record-keeping, pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and forgery. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. Kyla, to avoid more serious charges, agreed to cooperate fully with the prosecution against Declan's wider network. She also signed a divorce settlement that was heavily in my favor. She relinquished all claims to the house, my pension, and agreed to a payment plan to restore her share of the depleted joint funds and the Haloka money she'd spent. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that first lawyer's email. No fault on paper, but the truth was clear. The following year I sold the house. Too many ghosts, too many tainted memories in its rooms. The meticulously planned native plant garden felt like a monument to a failed experiment. I requested a transfer to a different high school in a quieter, smaller district upstate. A place where I was just Mr. Holloway, the new chemistry teacher, not that teacher whose wife tried to defraud him. The process of packing was cathartic. I kept my parents' books, my father's old flask, my mother's specimens. The rest I let go. It was about defining the new solution with known trusted components. My new school is smaller, the lab's less equipped, but the students are eager. I started a science club, and we do outreach to local middle schools, trying to ignite that spark of curiosity. My new apartment is modest, but it overlooks a small patch of woods, and I've started a new container garden on the balcony, herbs mostly. Simple, predictable reactions. I even started working on a proposal for a series of low-cost chemistry lab kits for under-resourced schools, using my experience to make science accessible. The work is challenging, fulfilling. It's a different kind of equation, but one I'm enjoying solving. A few months ago, I received an email forwarded by Isabel. It was from a woman in California. She'd been one of Declan's earlier targets, losing a substantial amount of her savings. My case, and the evidence I'd compiled, had apparently helped the FBI link Declan to several other interstate frauds, leading to a broader federal investigation that was now helping other victims recover some of their losses. "Mr. Holloway," she wrote, "your diligence in documenting what happened to you has had a ripple effect none of us could have foreseen. You didn't just fight for yourself, you inadvertently fought for all of us. Thank you for your courage and your incredible organization." I printed the email and pinned it above my new desk, a positive data point. I feel a sense of quiet equilibrium now. The anger has long since dissipated, neutralized by process and justice. I don't think about Kyla much. Last I heard from Isabel, she was working as a receptionist and trying to rebuild her life. No animosity, just a detached observation. Life, I've realized, is a lot like a complex chemical reaction. Sometimes it's predictable. Sometimes it's explosive and unexpected. The key is to observe carefully, understand the constituent elements, control the variables you can, and learn from the results, however catastrophic they might seem at the time. And sometimes, you discover that by meticulously cleaning up your own contaminated experiment, you provide a clearer path for others. That, in itself, is a kind of elegant solution.